Today we get to talk about the godfathers of heavy metal, Black Sabbath. Greetings, music heads. Welcome back to Sound Stories, episode number 10, with your host, Byron Nash. Today I get to talk about the godfathers of heavy metal, the almighty Black Sabbath. Originally, just so you know, I was going to just talk about Ozzy's guitar players and, the Randy Rhodes, the Zach Wilds, the Jakey Lees. And then I was like, well, if I leave out Sabbath, like I lose all credibility, and like Sabbath in itself is its own category. So I decided to focus on Ozzy, but break it up into two episodes. So the first one's going to be all things Black Sabbath, and then I'll do another one focusing on Ozzy solo. Voila. So that's what got us here. And I kind of, again, I think my mom's sort of the one that got me into Black Sabbath, but I'm like a backwards fan in the sense that I was probably more Ozzy's solo career first, and then like went backwards and went deep into the crates of the Sabbath world. So I don't know if any of you guys who are wrestling fans out there, but back in the day, it was either WWF or WWE or something. I'm not sure, but it was in the 80s, and there were these two. They were like tag team guys. They were called like the Road Warriors, and they would come out to Iron Man, and that was, I want to say, my first intro to Black Sabbath's music, where I knowingly knew that it was Black Sabbath. I know I heard the riffs here and there, but I just didn't know. I was still pretty young, and I always loved that song. But then around the same time, uh, or maybe even earlier than that, I remember it's probably 83, 84, going to school. And back then we would like take our favorite vinyl to school, like tote it around. And this kid I knew, Brett, he had Ozzy Speak of the Devil. And at that time, Ozzy solo, he's kind of known as a madman, the wild man, and, the bat's head and all that crazy stuff going on. But that album cover scared the crap out of me. He's got looks like jello blood coming out of his mouth. And there's the whole thing with the short person in the cross, and he has the throne on the inside. And that's all I knew, that it scared the crap out of me. But I was really intrigued. So as I was getting into a lot more metal and rock and hard rock, back then what was hard rock was really considered heavy metal, and then metal just got increasingly heavier. So it would be anything from like Twisted Sister to Ozzy, Motley Crue, Rat. That was all the bands, Priest, Maiden, that would be considered like heavy metal back then. Dio. So I remember just like that really standing out for me. And then as I started to listen to my own music on my own, uh, I got Ozzy's solo records. What I didn't realize about the Speak of the Devil was that Brad Gillis from Night Ranger played guitar on that, right? I mean, that's a well-known fact, but at the time, Night Ranger was pretty big back then. So I was blown away that he like crushed it like that. And he didn't have a lot of time to learn those songs either. That's coming off of the heels of Randy Rhoads passing away. So yeah, Speak of the Devil really image wise had me freaked out, but also had me really intrigued. So later on, when I got into Ozzy solo records, that's when I got like Diary of a Madman and Blizzard of Oz. And then I got Speak of the Devil, and then learned that like Brad Gillis played guitar on there. And when that came out and how he, was post Randy and all of that stuff. So I was an Ozzy fan at this point, like big time Ozzy, and had that sort of general heavy metal respect for Black Sabbath, but I didn't really know their music. Like I didn't know, like my mom saw them live, but I didn't know much about them as far as like the deep cuts. So then as I became a super Ozzy head, I ended up going backwards into the Sabbath catalog. And I knew some stuff. Like I had Paranoid. Once I got Paranoid, I was really all about that record. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, love that. And it's Sabbath is like a world of all of its own. And to me, I'm like, they're so incredible that it's unbelievable that they were making this music like that back then. And then what are the characteristics that make Sabbath so like heavy? Like, why do all the heaviest metal guys and thrashers all credit Sabbath? And I think there's many reasons, but a few would be the lower tuning and like the dark themes, and it was all about the riff. Like Sabbath is like the power of the riff, right? Um, and they're so memorable. It's like there's a reason why you go into a music store and there's 9 times out of 10 you're going to hear like Paranoid or some type of Ozzy or Sabbath related guitar riff, right? Because it was so monumental and so impactful. Um, but yeah, as I like got deeper into it, I started to understand Sabbath on a different level. Yes, it was heavy, definitely was dark. Sometimes I was even nervous playing and stuff like, the song Black Sabbath, like kind of scary, right? But then I realized like, what was it about their music that really made me and many others fall in love with them? And I think a lot of it was Ozzy's voice was really unique, and they were singing about these things, like singing about drugs, singing about Satan, singing about all this stuff that, especially at the time when they came out in the '70s, wasn't happening like that. But I think musically, the foundation that gave it a certain kind of like swing and weight was the influence of blues. You know, the voicings, the chords that were chosen, Tony Iommi's playing just iconic, right? But these riffs were huge. And I think a lot of people would probably disagree with this, but they'll take it out of context. There was a little bit of a jam bandy kind of hippie swing to them, like it wasn't like how metal's super tight right now. It was loose. It had like almost a jazz sensibility to it, which made it even like made the riffs heavier to me. Like it felt more human. It had a lot more pocket and the groove was everything. Sabbath is all riff and groove. um eh, they kind of changed my life in how I became a guitar player. Like the way that I play guitar really is influenced by the blues. um Even though I wasn't listening to the blues, but like Sabbath, the way that they filtered blues through them really became the foundation for how I ended up approaching guitar. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. And I got this box set in the '90s. It's a Black Sabbath box set, the Ozzy years. And this, once I got this, because I didn't have a lot of money at the time to buy a bunch of records, so I'd either record things off my friends' CDs or records or whatever I could, cassettes. But once I got that box set, it really was like the deep dive of all the, like we know the Paranoids and the NIB and all the famous riffs, but all the deep tracks I really got into, like the Writ and um God, what else we got on here? I don't know, Tomorrow's Dream, Cornucopia, things like that. Under the Sun. There's a really interesting thing going on with the Sabbath tone where it's almost kind of like heavy metal hippie-ish, or if you think about how the riffs will be really heavy, but then it'll go to this other whole other part, which would normally be considered the bridge, but it almost feels like a whole new song and then takes you back, you know? And I really like that style of writing. And I felt like there was really good storytelling from Ozzy's lyrics and everything. So I want to know from you guys, like of what we think the top 5 Black Sabbath riffs are. What are your top 5 Black Sabbath riffs? Now, we can say what are the most popular top 5. We'll kind of toggle in between that. Here's what I got. And you guys can tell me in the comments below if you agree or don't agree. And everyone's going to think something different. But this is from many years of listening to heavy metal and people covering songs and being a guitar player. I would say these are the at least most well known off the top of the dome. So I got Paranoid, Iron Man, War Pigs, Sweet Leaf, and Children of the Grave. Now that could easily, Children could be swapped out with NIB if you want. I mean, it's an opinion thing, but I think those are like, I think the most iconic, most famous ones that people kind of, if you're a guitar player starting to learn guitar, like those are some of the ones that you would try to learn. But then what are the top three darkest Black Sabbath riffs? Like, what are your top three? I would say Black Sabbath because that's just terrifying. That still sounds scary now. Electric Funeral, I think, is just like this dark psychedelic groove. I don't even understand how they got that tone, but I think that's one of their darkest, heaviest riffs. And Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, like that smashes for me. Um, if I were to say my top three Black Sabbath records, I had to write some of this down because I knew I would go off the cuff and be looking into the lights and just be like, "Where am I at?" I would say Volume Four, Paranoid for sure, and then Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Now, eh, I think that like something special about this record because of all the deep cuts for me, but I really do feel like this is sort of quintessential Black Sabbath too. I had the honor of back in December of 2025 to be on a Ozzy tribute concert, which was incredible. So I got to learn some Sabbath stuff, but also got to learn some Jakey Lee stuff, and also got to learn some Randy Rhoads stuff. But staying in that space and revisiting Black Sabbath and Ozzy, and just thinking they are the foundation of the whole thing. And I'm so grateful for those guys, for what they did and what they contributed to music and guitar and tone and studio production and just the whole heavy metal genre and what they contributed and how they really laid the foundation. And you can tell that because at Back to the Beginning, the outpouring was so intense and so heavy and so emotionally impacting for all the fans. I felt it and I wasn't even there. So then I'd say, hmm, I forget about this, but at the time I had a little crappy electric guitar that I still have, but I was really getting into acoustic music. So with heavy metal, like Fates Warning, Metallica, all those bands would always have these great interludes or like mid-section things that were beautiful acoustic music, Ingve stuff. And Sabbath had some awesome ones. And I felt like the Sabbath acoustic material was closer to Led Zeppelin than it was to that other stuff, and it just had this different tone to it. It felt like really vintage and had this like English history in the notes and the voicing and the, the timing, the style of acoustic Tony was playing. So I fell in love with that stuff, which ended up becoming the foundation of me wanting to play acoustic so much. So I'd say my top five acoustic pieces of Black Sabbath would be, what was it? Spiral Architect, Fluff. Fluff so much that I named one of my, I had a kitten back when I was a teenager, and I named her Fluff because she was fluffy because of Black Sabbath. Um, a Bite of Finger or a Bit of Finger, Embryo, and Orchid. All of those are so interesting, simple, but kind of intricate in their own way. And so I think if you throw all the Black Sabbath components into a big old bowl, um, that's why they're the best. That's why they are, respected and revered the way that they are for what they contributed for the foundation and the continuation of heavy metal. So the biggest thing is the power of the riff, right? So I just wanted to share that with you guys. But I am curious about your favorite records, your favorite riffs. What acoustic Black Sabbath do you love? I didn't go into the other singers or any of that stuff. I'm just going to stay focused on the Ozzy years. And then the next episode, I will focus on the Ozzy solo guitar players, which will be a really fun one. So I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you for watching, sharing, commenting. Please subscribe below. Channel's building slowly, but I'm a brick by brick type of guy. So I do appreciate that, everyone. And stay tuned for more sound stories with Byron Nash. I'm going to just play a Black Sabbath riff. Why not? Let's just rock out on it. Peace.